Today, we're diving into something pretty mind-blowing when it comes to traumatic brain injuries, or TBIs. We're talking about a connection between the site of the injury and, get this, a part of the body you would least expect, your gut. So let's just kick things off with a question that kind of turns everything we thought we knew about head trauma on its head. What if the key to healing the brain wasn't actually in the brain at all? I know, it sounds wild, but it's opening up this incredible new chapter in neuroscience. And this quote right here, it really nails a huge shift in how we think about this stuff. You see, for the longest time, a TBI was treated like a one-and-done event. You get hit, there's damage, and that's that. But what we're learning is that's not the whole story at all. It's more like a disease process, one that keeps developing and getting worse for months, maybe even years. Okay, so that leads us to the big mystery, right? Why do the effects of a TBI stick around for so long? And why do they so often get worse? To figure this out, we've got to play detective and look way beyond that initial hit. Here's the thing you've got to understand. That first impact, that physical force, that's just the spark. The real, lasting damage comes from what happens next, something scientists call secondary injury mechanisms. Think of it like a biological chain reaction that starts a slow-burning fire inside the brain, a fire that can keep smoldering long after the initial wound seems to have healed. All right, every good investigation needs clues, and our first clue takes us right to the scene of the crime, the brain. More specifically, we're going to look at the brain's own immune system. So let me introduce you to the key players here, the microglia. The best way to think of them as the brain's own personal security guards. They're on patrol 24/7, cleaning up messes and jumping into action at the first sign of trouble. When everything's working right, these guys are absolutely essential for a healthy brain. But after a TBI, something changes. In a healthy brain, the response is swift and targeted. The security guards handle the issue, then they go back to their posts. Simple. But after a head injury, these microglia get, primed. They go into this hyperactive state. They never really stand down. Imagine those security guards, but now they're jumpy, they've had way too much coffee, and they're ready to freak out and launch a massive, full-blown, and honestly toxic response to even the tiniest little thing. And that's the million-dollar question, isn't it? The brain security system is stuck on high alert. But why? What is constantly poking the bear, keeping these cells on a hair trigger for months, or even years? Well, to find that answer, we need to look somewhere you would never expect. And this is where our investigation takes a turn. Clue number 2, an unexpected witness. The gut. Yep, you heard that right. It turns out your brain and your gut are constantly talking to each other. And when your head takes a hit, your gut hears it loud and clear. And this part is just incredible. The shock waves from that brain injury can literally travel down your nervous system and cause actual physical damage to the lining of your gut. It weakens that critical barrier that's supposed to keep the good stuff in and the bad stuff out. This damage causes a condition that you might have heard of, leaky gut. The technical term is intestinal permeability. So if we imagine your intestinal wall is like this really sophisticated security fence, a TBI basically punches holes in it. The whole barrier is compromised. And what slips through those holes? Stuff that has absolutely no business being in your bloodstream. We're talking about little pieces of bacteria called endotoxins. When these things escape, they're like system-wide alarm bells going off everywhere, sparking inflammation throughout your entire body. Okay, so let's recap our clues. We've got a super sensitive, jumpy security team in the brain, and we've got a busted security fence in the gut. Now, let's connect the dots and see how these two things team up to create a truly vicious cycle. And here it is. This is the whole picture, the whole conspiracy laid bare. It's a feedback loop. The brain injures the gut, and then the gut turns around and keeps the brain's inflammation going. Let's walk through this step by step so it all makes sense. All right, here's how it goes down. First, the head injury happens, right? And that puts those little security guards in the brain, the microglia, on super high alert. Then the signal from that injury zips down to the gut and literally damages the intestinal wall. So now the gut is leaky, and all those bacterial toxins start spilling into the bloodstream. This, of course, triggers a massive inflammatory response all over the body. And here's the kicker. Those inflammatory signals, they travel all the way back up to the brain. They find those already primed jumpy microglia, and they just set them off. The microglia totally overreact, creating even more inflammation in the brain. And boom, the loop is complete. It just feeds itself over and over again. So you see what's happening? That leaky gut is basically just pouring gasoline on the fire that's already smoldering in the brain. And that's how the damage can stick around, and even get worse, long after the initial injury should have been a distant memory. But hey, understanding the problem is the first step to solving it, right? Cracking this case isn't just an academic exercise. It points us to a completely new way to think about treatment, a whole new path to healing. I mean, think about it. If the gut is part of the problem, then maybe, just maybe, it can be part of the solution. And that opens the door to all sorts of therapies you'd never in a million years connect to a brain injury. We're talking about things like probiotics and prebiotics, certain nutritional supplements, even stimulating something called the vagus nerve, which is like the data table connecting your gut and brain. The mission becomes pretty clear. Heal the gut to help heal the brain. And if you need to see just how critical this is, look at this graph. The green line, that's just the brain's normal resilience over a lifetime. The blue line shows what a TBI does. It lowers that resilience. But look at the red line. That's what happens when you have a TBI and you have gut issues. The two problems feed on each other, and the drop-off in brain health is, well, it's fast and it's steep. It's a really big deal. So here's the bottom line. The thing you really need to take away from all this is about so much more than just getting over a concussion. By focusing on this gut-brain connection, we might finally have a way to protect the brain from the really scary long-term effects of head injuries. I mean, things like reducing the risk of devastating neurodegenerative diseases later in life. So we end up right back where we started, with a question that could change everything. For so long, we thought a brain injury was a problem that started and ended inside the skull. But what if, to truly heal the head, we have to start by looking at the gut? It's a radical thought, but it's one that might just revolutionize how we treat the brain.